Right. So while some of you are finishing up the columns, we are going to talk about the trig functions. So this is called trig functions of real numbers. Okay, and so we are going to find exact values of trig functions at special locations on the unit circle today. Okay, so we have to keep in mind that each point on the unit circle is cosine and sine. Okay, so if it's a point on the unit circle, we know that the x value is cosine and the y value is sine. So often we use theta. They're going to be using t. So this is your x and your y. So if we let t be any real number and let the point xy be a terminal point on the unit circle, we can define the sine of t as our y value, the cosine of t as our x value, and the tangent as y over x. Okay, and this is where x can't be 0. Okay, and then you guys might remember the reciprocal functions. The cosecant, okay, is defined as 1 divided by y, where y can't be 0. And the secant of t would be 1 over x, where x can't be 0. And then the cotangent would be x over y, where y can't be 0. Okay, so using the first quadrant of the unit circle, you guys filled in your y coordinates and your x coordinates. Okay, so for your sine values, you should have 0, 1/2, root 2 over 2, root 3 over 2, and 1. Okay, for your x coordinates, you have 1, root 3 over 2, root 2 over 2, 1/2, and 0. So when you go to calculate the tangent, you are doing y divided by x. Okay, do you need more time figuring out the tangent before I call on you to help me? And then if you are done with that, you can start working on the cosecant. Okay, so we know the cosecant is 1 over the sine, the secant is 1 over the cosine. Okay, so with the tangent, you are doing the division. Okay, so Jackson, for the tangent of 0, what'd you get for that first value there? Yep, so 0 divided by 1 is 0. Okay, when you guys do 1/2 divided by root 3 over 2, remember you're multiplying by the reciprocal. Don't leave it as 1 over root 3. You have to simplify. Okay, so Charlotte, what did you get when you simplified that? Yep, root 3 over 3, great. All right, and then Victoria, what'd you get for pi over 4? Yep, anything divided by itself is going to be 1. Okay, and then Cam, what'd you get for pi over 3? Okay, I'll give you guys more time. So if you're done with this, you guys can go on to the cosecant, secant, and the cotangent. So the cosecant, if you're ready for that, is just going to be the reciprocal. and then Cam, what'd you get for this one? Yeah. Okay, and then when you have 1 divided by 0, if 0's on the bottom, what do we call that? What do you put? Undefined, yeah? Good. Okay, so 1 over sign, you're doing the reciprocal. Okay, so you are looking at your y value, you are putting that under 1. So if 0's on the bottom, again, it's just going to be undefined. Okay, and then Ella, what'd you get for the next one here at pi over 6? 2, great. Okay, so we're just flipping that. If you flip this 2 over root 2, you have to simplify, right? You have 2 over root 2, you're going to multiply the top and the bottom by root 2. You'll have some cancellations. All right, and then Suresh, what did that simplify to for you? Yep, and then what can you cancel out? Yes, so if you have 2 root 2 over 2, your 2's will cancel. You'll be left with root 2. Okay, and then John, what'd you get for pi over 3? Yep, 2 root 3 over 3. Okay, and again, it's because you're flipping that, you're multiplying by root 3 on the top and the bottom. Okay, it's okay to write it out and then show those steps there. And then at pi over 2, you're doing 1 over 1, which is just what? 1. All right, and then Jake, what'd you get for 0 for the secant? So for that one, it'll be the 1 over 1 instead of 0. So do with the x coordinate. Yep. All right, and then Andrew, what'd you get for the next one? Yep, 2 root 3 over 3. Great. Spencer, what'd you get for pi over 4? Okay, let's flip it. So if you do 2 over root 2, what are you going to do to simplify? Multiply. Don't divide by it, but multiply. Right? So then you'll have 2 root 2 over 2. And then what happens with the 2's? Those are going to cancel, so what do you have left? Yep. Okay, good. And then, so you have root 2, and then at pi over 3, Leo, what'd you get for that? 2. Good. Okay, and then Ali, what'd you get for pi over 2? Undefined. Yep. If 0's on the bottom, you're going to have undefined. All right, now we're going to do the cotangent. So the cotangent is either, you can think of it as the reciprocal of tangent, or you can do x divided by y. Okay, so again, we have that 1 divided by 0. We should have undefined. Okay, and then Kate, what'd you get for at pi over 6? Root 3, great. Okay, and then Morgan, what'd you get at pi over 4? 1. Jude, what'd you get at pi over 3? Yep. And then Toby, what'd you get at pi over 2? 0. Okay, nice. Okay, hopefully you guys notice some patterns here, right? Look at tangent and cotangent. See how this goes from 0 to undefined? This goes from 0 to undefined in the other direction. Okay, same thing happens with those 2 reciprocals. So understand whenever they are asking for a reciprocal, you can put that over 1 or you can do the flip. Okay, the reciprocal identities that you have to know are the cosecant is 1 over the sine. I always try to remember that if it starts with a C, the reciprocal has the S in it. Okay, and then the reciprocal of secant is 1 over the cosine. And when we're working with cotangent, we can think of this as 1 over the tangent, or we can think of this as your cosine over your sine. Okay, and something new for us are going to be the even and odd properties. Okay, this is something we're also going to look at in Chapter 7. And to fully understand them, we're going to do a few things up here. So it says this is a no calculator unit. Okay, so using your knowledge of the unit circle, okay, I want you guys to write out the sign of pi over 6 and write out the sign of negative pi over 6. What would those be equal to? And then we're going to do the same thing for cosine. Okay, so what's the cosine at pi over 6? What's the cosine at negative pi over 6? Okay, and I just want you to put those right there at the top. All right, so if you're looking at the sign, you're looking at the y-coordinate. Okay, so the y-coordinate at pi over 6, you can see in quadrant 1 on the board is 1/2. Okay, and the cosine would be root 3 over 2. Okay, because that's your point, that's your x, that's your y. Okay, now to find the cosine of negative pi over 6, we have to know what quadrant that is on the unit circle. So what quadrant is negative pi over 6 in? Yep, quadrant 4. Okay, so in quadrant 4, your x value is positive, your y value is negative. Okay, which means your sine value, which is y, is going to be negative 1/2. And for the cosine, it's going to be the same. It's going to be positive root 3 over 2. Okay, the even and odd properties are going to be related to this, so we're going to refer back to them. Okay, the odd properties are going to include the sine and the tangent. Okay, so if it is odd, what that means is if you were to take the sine of a negative value, it would be equal to the opposite of the sine of t. Okay, you might remember when we were studying polynomials and the directions their ends went in. If it was odd, they went opposite directions. Okay, here if it's odd, you are going to get the opposite value of the sine. So let's look at how that applies here. If you did the sine of negative pi over 6, you would get negative 1/2. That's equal to the opposite of what we get at sine of pi over 6. Okay, so these two values are opposites. The same thing holds true for the reciprocal function for sine, which is the cosecant. And for the tangent, that is the other odd property. So this would be equal to the opposite of the tangent of t. And the same thing would hold true for the cotangent. Okay, so this is just a property. It's based on the positions of the unit circle. And there is an even function, that is the cosine. Okay, if it is even, let's see if we can decide what happens. If you do the cosine of a negative value, let's see what it's equal to. So the cosine of negative pi over 6 was root 3 over 2. The cosine of pi over 6 was root 3 over 2. Okay, so these two values are the same. So the cosine of negative t is equal to the cosine of positive t. Okay, kind of similar to if they're even, they went in the same direction. In this case, if they're even, it's going to be the same value. And the same thing happens for the reciprocal function. Okay, and again, that's based on the placement of the unit circle and the special properties that the unit circle has related to the quadrants. Okay, so this unit we're going to do without our calculator and without a full unit circle. So you just have to know the first quadrant and then where your values are positive and negative for each quadrant. Okay, and based on those, you are going to be able to find these special places on the unit circle. Okay, and we're just going to keep in mind that people are at different places here, so some of you might know the unit circle very well, okay, and you might be able to do a lot of this in your head. That is fine. Okay, if you're somebody who's visual that may be struggling with finding where the values are and how to keep those straight, I'm going to give you some strategies today. So when you are finding the exact value of the trig function at the given real number, you are finding a place on the unit circle. Okay, and I'm saying it's a point on the unit circle, but it can just be a coordinate. Okay, it can be something that is found from the given point. Okay, so I'm going to give you the sign. You have to find the sign of 2 pi over 3. Okay, you can use quadrant 1, and then you can also do the tangent at negative 4 pi over 3. Alright, so I'm going to give you a minute to do those. Okay, so again, like I said, we just have some different levels here. If you're having trouble getting started, keep in mind that when you're finding the sign, all you have to do is find the y coordinate at 2 pi over 3. Okay, so the first thing I would do is I would find what quadrant it's in, because you know whatever quadrant it's in, that's going to give you your signs here. Okay, so find the quadrant of 2 pi over 3. Okay, so it's 2 times pi over 3. Here's 1 pi over 3, 2 pi over 3. It's in quadrant 2. That lets me know that x value is negative and the y value is positive. We are finding the y there. The second thing you can do is you can use your reference angle. Okay, and then you can convert it to that point. So if you know that pi over 3, okay, is this point of 1/2 root 3 over 2, then when you convert it, you're just going to make the x negative. And then your third step is to just find the y coordinate, okay, which is root 3 over 2. Okay, like I said, some of you might not need all that. Some of you can do that very quickly, and that is fine. Okay, these are just ways to help people who are having a little more trouble visualizing where that's going to be. Okay, and then we're doing the tangent at negative 4 pi over 3. So when you're trying to decide where the quadrant is, I'm drawing a visual for you. If you guys know where that is right away, you do not have to draw the visual when you're doing this on your own, okay? So this is negative 3 pi over 3, negative 4 pi over 3, again would be in quadrant 2, okay, which is a negative x and a positive y. Okay, so we're using again that same reference angle at pi over 3, and then I would convert. Okay, so you have negative 1/2 root 3 over 2. And that's when I put my negative in there. Okay, to find the tangent, all you have to do is y divided by x. So you have root 3 over 2 divided by negative 1/2. That's one way you can do it. Okay, another way you can do it is if you know the first quadrant with your tangents. Okay, so when you calculated the tangents today, on the front side, okay, you have 0, root 3 over 3, 1, root 3. You can remember these. They go in order. You can just use your reflection. So at pi over 3, if you can just remember that it's root 3 and then convert it to quadrant 2. Do you guys remember the acronym we use for where different values are positive? All students take classes. Okay, so the sign is the only thing that's positive in quadrant 2, which means the tangent's going to be negative. Okay, so tangent is negative in quadrant 2. Okay, and you can just reflect it. If you don't remember that, you can always calculate it, but I think you guys are going to find it's a lot easier to just use the reflection to get negative root 3. Okay, so if I were doing this, I'd be like, oh, this is root 3. This is just the reflection, negative root 3. Okay? All right. Well, you guys try the next few. So you have the cosine of 14 pi over 3 and the cotangent of negative 3 pi over 2. So feel free to draw out a visual if that helps you. Okay, so for 14 pi over 3, remember that one time around the circle is 6 pi over 3. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So another time would be 12 pi over 3. So 13, 14 would be in quadrant, oh, look at that, quadrant 2. Okay, so your cosine is going to be your x value. So your value should be negative there. Okay, we've been using this point a lot, so we should know now it is negative 1/2. Okay, so it's that same point that we have been using. Okay, at negative 1/2 root 3 over 2. If it's cosine, you only need your x coordinate, okay? All right, now for the cotangent, it's negative 3 pi over 2. That's at the same place as what other radian value? It's negative 3 pi over 2. Same place as what? At pi over 2. Okay, because it's negative 1, negative 2, negative 3. This point is 0, 1. Okay, the cotangent is x divided by y. What's 0 divided by 1? 0. When is it undefined? Yep, if 0 is on the bottom. Something's divided by 0, then it's undefined. Okay, so sometimes it'll be 0 if it's on the top. Sometimes it'll be undefined if it's on the bottom. Okay, and let's find the secant of 5 pi over 4. Okay, so again, find what works for you. You might just be using the reference angle. You might want to write that down first. You might want to do the quadrant first. So when you guys see the 5 pi over 4, do we know right away the reference angle is going to be pi over 4? So we know it has to involve the root 2 over 2. Okay, so 4 pi over 4 is at pi. 5 pi over 4 would be in quadrant 3, where these are both negative values. Okay, the secant is going to be the reciprocal of which function, sine or cosine? The cosine. Okay, so it's 1 over the cosine of the value or 1 over your x value. Okay, so if you know that pi over 4 is root 2 over 2 and quadrant 3, they're both negative. Okay, you don't have to write out both of them. I'm just trying to show you how that relates. So you are going to do the reciprocal of x. You can either do 1 divided by, and you can do that calculation, or if it's the reciprocal, you can just flip it, right? So you can just flip to 2 over negative root 2. From there, we simplify, okay? And you will notice that you do have a value in your chart that's very close. Okay, you just don't have the negative value. Okay, so you should have a negative root 2. All right, and then the last thing we're doing today is finding the sine, cosine, and the tangent when there is a real number t given and a terminal point is determined by that real number. So what that means is this point is on the unit circle. Okay, so if that point is on the unit circle, this is your x, this is your y. So if you want to find the sine and the cosine, all you need is that definition. We know the sine of t is equal to y. So you're just going to plug in your y value. The cosine of t is equal to x. You're just going to plug in your x value. And then we have to find the tangent. Okay, so to calculate the tangent, you just do y divided by x. Negative 12/13 divided by negative 5/13. Okay, when you're doing this, you can just jump into that multiplying by the reciprocal, 13 over negative 5. And then just make sure you know how to simplify. So if you have a negative over a negative, we know that simplifies to a positive value. All right, so I'm going to have you do part B. Okay, so this terminal point P determined by a real number is given to you. Because it's a terminal point, we know it is on the unit circle. Okay, and then you are finding your sine, your cosine, and your tangent. All right, and you guys can check to make sure you did your cancellations correctly. Okay, so your sine is your y, cosine is your x, tangent reduces to 2. Okay, and then your classwork is something that needs to be turned in today. If you want to finish it for points, you can absolutely do that, but it won't be mandatory.